the anatomy of a blessing. You see, most people in the world, if I say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech, you'll know the word. What's the next word after Melech? Haolam. Everyone knows that. And those 6 words, you'll say them throughout your whole life. You should know what you're saying. And as you saw yesterday, those who were here, that if you know those 6 words, if you know even the first one, like you could say that first word longer than most people say an entire blessing. If you saw yesterday, you saw the depth that's involved in the word Baruch and the depth of the word Atah. So you should your blessing should sound more like this. Baruch. Because you're thinking through all the things we discussed yesterday that are involved in the word Baruch. Atah. There are actually plenty of seats today. We did Baruch, we did Atah, and now today we're on the next word, which is God's name, which is Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. And I taught you guys a little secret about that, and I'll just repeat that real quick, and that is that the name Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey is actually a pictorial. This represents the spiritual, and this represents the physical. And when you look at the name of God that is most commonly used, so it has a Yud, okay, representing purely spiritual, it doesn't even touch the earth. It's completely floating in the spiritual realm. Then the Hey, which represents that idea going into dimension. So it would be like, if I wanted to build a house, so that would be like a Yud. I feel like building a house. The Hey would be what kind of house. That's everything that shows up in a blueprint. It's putting that thought, I want to build a house, into all its dimension. There's still no house. Then there's another letter that's just like a Yud. See the Yud? But it's a Vav. It connects that idea now and implements that idea into a house. So now you have tractors clearing away the house, meaning clearing away the foundations, pouring the cement into the foundations. And then in the physical realm, when that actual implementation takes place in dimension, so you have the final Hey of God's name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. In other words, God has no names. There are depictions. It's a depiction of God. Another name you see on mezuzahs, Shin, Dalet, and Yud, which means that it's enough, meaning God's creating the world. So that Vav, see the Vav, is just creating a world, but that can just blow through everything. There's another aspect of God that limits that flow. That's called Shin and Dalet and Yud. Shah, how does it end? Die, that said that that's enough. That She is that, Die, it's enough. And it stops there. And you'll see actually when it talks about in Aleinu L'Shabeach, it uses the name Shin and Dalet and Yud when it comes to idolaters. That God will establish his kingdom. The kingdom of Shin, Dalet, Yud. Because you'll notice that idolaters are generally doing whatever they feel like, and they just do whatever they want. And then they give some offering to some god for whatever they had to do. Like they pay off the gods, meaning they don't limit themselves. And so when we limit ourselves in all kinds of ways, because whenever you stop yourself from doing the wrong thing, you're limiting yourself in some way. You're giving God a kingdom. When you limit yourself in certain ways, you're giving yourself kingdom. You're giving God kingdom. And you're giving your marriage sanctity, for example, because you're limited to that spouse. And that causes sanctity. And that's saying, die, that's enough. Like one spouse is enough. And one partner in life is enough. Whereas the idolaters would just go crazy and they lacked that limiting factor. And therefore God lacked kingdom. So, anyway, but that's the idea. Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Now, let me do a pictorial for you, especially for my 5-minute group, so you guys just get a good idea of what we're talking about. This circle represents the physical, the entire physical space-time continuum. Let's say if you're a Big Banger, so that's the Big Bang, okay? And these are galaxies, and let's just say we're inside of this galaxy, and that's our solar system, our Earth is all inside that little dot there, okay? Now, what's outside this system here? So that's everything beyond space and time, okay? Everything surrounding space and time. Now you'll notice that this name, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, represents, it's the makeup of the letters Haya, I'm putting these lines, by the way, just so we can erase them, because a lot of God's names here. You're not allowed to erase God's name. Haya, Hoveh, and Yihiyeh. Yeh. Okay, which means was, is, and will be. This name represents God outside space and time. Was, is, and will be. Clear? So you look what's outside space and time. This is that which surrounds space and time is the name Yud and He and Vav and He. Do you get how this represents outside space and time? This name, Yud and He and Vav and He, not only is it a pictorial of how God creates the world, but it's God's name in the form of eminence, beyond space and time. It's a name that refers to God beyond space and time, that's all. Clear enough? But then we have inside space and time. Now, what's wrong with this picture? If we say God is infinite, He's infinite, He's unlimited by space and time, where do these squiggly lines also have to be? Do you see how I've limited from going inside the circle? Do you see that? And that's a problem. Because we're saying ultimately that God does not, he's outside, but He's not inside, which means God's limited. God is limited by the actual physical world. Now, once you say God's limited, that means God's not infinite. And if you say God's not infinite, so then you're no longer talking Judaism anymore. See, the rest of the traditions that are into God, they may use the word infinite, but they don't mean it. They don't mean it. In Judaism, we mean it. God is literally unlimited by space and time. So then you might be asking, why did I make a circle at all? Maybe I shouldn't have made a circle. Why did I make a space-time circle? Why? Because here we are, and we're in some kind of physical realm here. So God, it must be that there's some kind of distinction between the infinite and the finite, because here we are inside the finite world. They must be distinct from one another. So where do I have to put the squiggly lines as well? Where do they have to go? Where should I put them? I've got to put them everywhere. I've got to put them also inside the circle. Well, let's see what happens when we put them inside the circle. So when the squiggly lines go inside the circle as well, then we run out of ink. When we put the squiggly lines inside the circle, you start to realize that there is no more circle. Circle's gone. And all that's left is God, ultimately. That's all there is. And then you're really being like literal about God being infinite. What I'd like to call hardcore monotheists. Meaning softcore monotheists see the world as, there's the circle and then there's the squiggly lines out here. So like, this is real in here. Okay, it's real in, and we believe there's a God out there. Okay? Here we're saying that God that's out there is infinite, it's unlimited by space and time, and therefore it must by force be filling the circle as well. So God is both the tortilla and the rice and beans that are filling the tortilla. Okay, God is surrounding and filling creation. The whole enchilada, right? And so this picture explains so much about Judaism. Because once you get this picture, now you know why it is that we cover our eyes, for example, when we say Shema. Right? We take our right hand, we cover our eyes, and we say Shema. Because right now, I see the circle. I see physicality. I see tables, floors, people, physical. But when I'm saying Shema and saying that God's absolutely one, unlimited by space and time, undifferentiated by creation, so I take my hand and I cover my eyes so as not to see the differentiation of the physical world around me. When I say Shema, I also gather my tzitzis. You notice we wear this four-cornered garment. So I gather these four corners. I put them together. The four corners represent north, south, east, west. They represent extension, space, distinction, physicality. I gather all four corners. I put them on the webbing of my pinky here. And I put them on the webbing there. Then I hold them out the top like that. Has to be specifically on the webbing for another reason. And then I put all four corners here, and then I cover my eyes. Because I'm saying that all of these four directions, north, south, east, west, are an illusion. They're really an illusion. The Kabbalah calls the physical world the world of illusion or the world of lies, because it's lying about the true oneness of what's happening all around us. But every mitzvah is like this. The tzitzis are about it. The Shema is about it. The tefillins to remind you of it. The mezuzah, you touch the mezuzah before you leave, and you remember that when I go out of my house, see, my house, I can make it godly. I can cover the bookshelves with Torah books. I can put Judaica everywhere. I can have my whole house one big godly sanctuary. But once I leave my house, okay, in Jerusalem, it's pretty cool. But when you leave your house in New York or L.A. or wherever you might be from, Johannesburg, when you leave your house, so there's no one keeping the oneness of God around. So what do? You touch your mezuzah and you just stand there for a second. You go, whoop, and then you kiss and you move out into the jungle of space and time, the place where like anything can happen, anything goes, and most people you meet don't even believe in any of this stuff. But you are already safeguarded. You've already gotten your special pill, that safeguards you. The inoculation of the mezuzah when you've left your home. You always touch that mezuzah before you leave. And then to get back in the house, you need a key, but you also touch it again. And you say, I'm back. And you slide back into your home, which is a sanctuary for God and for Shabbat and kosher and Torah study. And there's no television. There's no open internet. The kids are protected. Their minds are protected, because Jews, don't forget, see their minds as real estate. So what I was describing was so much of Judaism is just getting rid of that circle. Living in the circle, but getting rid of the circle. And obviously it boils down to selfishness. Let's say you're in business, and something's happened in business where you must pull out Jewish law to deal with it, because you're going to wind up with more money that's not necessarily yours, but no one's really going to notice, or maybe they did notice and now they're angry. And so you have to break out the Talmud, which is Jewish law, which is God gave us at Sinai, not only spiritual law, but He gave us all the civil law. So now you have to break out your Talmud, and you have to understand, how do we draw the lines and make a proper adjudication of who gets the money in a particular business situation. So again, in that circle's where selfishness would be, but I can't be selfish. I have to deal with Jewish law and open up the Talmud and find out who actually gets the money. Now, I'm going to bring the circle back. Okay, there's our circle. Okay, there's the circle. And you see that God still surrounds creation, but He also permeates creation. He's both surrounding and filling, eminent and immanent. Now, the name of God for how God is immanent is a whole other name, and this is now so we've done so far Baruch, we've done Atah, now we've done Hashem, which is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, and now we have Elokeinu. I'm going to put a dash. We say Heinu, but we pronounce it Keinu when we're just talking. When I'm saying a blessing, I'll say Elo and then Heinu. But when I'm talking about it from now on, I'll be saying K, Elokeinu, just to change it a little. Because we're extra careful with God's names, trying not to use them in vain. Okay, so Elokeinu, yeah, is actually a construct state of two things. One is the name Elo, and then Him. And then the other word is Shelanu. Okay? Elokim means God. We're going to explain what form of God's name that is. And Shelanu is our. So you'll see that the Torah in the translation, the Art Scroll prayer book, will say our God. So it says, blessed are you, Hashem, our God. But you see that this is a totally separate name. In English, they don't distinguish it, so they just say our God. So it sounds like, blessed are you, God, our God. A little redundant. Certainly possessive. Our God. It's like our God, not someone else's God. The reason it says our God, not someone else's, is not that we're ethnocentric. It's not like we have the patent on a relationship with God. We certainly don't. Every human being can have a relationship with God. The reason it's called our God is because on a general level, the Jewish people who were down in Egypt and got the Torah at Mount Sinai and had this covenant, eternal covenant with God, so that's why it's called our God, because of the covenant with God. We call it our God. So Elokim Shelanu comes out to Elokeinu, right? Elokeinu just means Elokim Shelanu. Now there's something very interesting about the name Elokim. I'm going to put it right here. Something very interesting about the name Elokim, and that is the Yud and the Mem at the end. What is wrong with that? The Yud and the Mem at the end of God's name. What is a Yud and a Mem at the end of a name? Plural. Yud and Mem at the end of a name is plural. How do you say child in Hebrew? Yeled. How do you say children? Yeladim. Yud and Mem at the end of a word represents plurality, which is very strange. A siren should be going off. Woo, woo, woo. How could it be that the Jewish people, who are the monotheists, who have basically waged war against the pagan world, who have multiple gods, and yet have a name of God that is in the plural? How can it be? The answer is that the Yud and the Mem of this name of God. Well, you should answer the question. Look where I put it. Look where it is here. You got surrounding space and time. Was, is, and will be. That's Yud and He and Vav and He. And then you got filling space and time is Elokim. Why is it in the plural? Why is it plurality? Where is that name represented? Yeah, it's everywhere, but it's in the physical world. It's the rice and beans. Meaning, if Yud and He and Vav and He, Hashem, is the name of the tortilla, so to speak. So the rice and beans name is Elokim. And there are a lot of beans in a burrito. There's a lot of rice in a burrito. There's a lot of tables in this room. There's a lot of protons, neutrons, electrons. A lot of molecules. And so we have a name of God, of how God is infusing physicality. There's a name of God, how God surrounds physicality. And there's a name of God of how God is inside of physicality. And that name is Elokim. And it's a very, very special name. Very special name because it represents the physical world. And it's the numerical value, actually, of the word hateva, which means the nature. Hateva is the nature of the world. And you see hateva is He is 5, Tet is 9, that's 14, Bet is 16, and then Ayin is 70. What's 16 plus 70? 86, right? So, 2, you'll see the name Elokim. Aleph is 1, 30 is Lamed is 30, that's 31, plus He is 36, plus Yud is 46, plus a Mem is another 40, is 86. It's the same numerical value as the nature, because the nature of the world is plurality, it's physicality. And the physicality, though, is really just God in creation. It's God immanent in creation. God's not only surrounding, but He's filling creation. And we have a name for that. And the state of God inside of all things is called Elokus, or for Ashkenazim, Elokus, or for Sephardim would be Elokut. And that's the state of God in all things. So inside your table is Elokus. Inside your jacket is Elokus. Elokus is in everything. And therefore, a real monotheist, a hardcore monotheist, not the one who thinks that we exist separate from God, but the hardcore monotheist who realizes that we are of God, and God is filling all things, is in touch with the Elokus inside of all things, and therefore treads lightly, is careful. He's trying to make the least footprint possible in this world and the strongest handprint. That's what I like to say. I want to make the smallest footprint because I don't want to mess with the world. It's all Elokus. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to tell a lie because what are the vocalizations, which are creating sound waves, made of? They're made of a lie. They're made of against Elokus. It's ungodly to lie. So now I have these ungodly words reverberating up through an entire matrix of vibrational patterns because the whole world's made of vibrational patterns. So I don't want to put out lie into the world. So I want to tread lightly. I want as little a footprint as possible in God's world, on the Elokus. And I want to have the highest level of fingerprints, the least footprints and the highest fingerprints of touching the world, making the world a better place, fixing the world, helping others. I want a big handprint and a small footprint. I want to make as little trouble as possible and promote as much goodness as possible. This helps you understand a bit of Shema, because obviously these two names show up in Shema. So Shema, which is again a very cool word. Look at Shema. Shema has a shin, which represents fire. You see how it expands from a point, right? It's coming from a point and expanding up. That's the shin of Shema. It looks like a campfire, okay? It represents actual fire. Like this is Aish HaTorah, but the word Aish is the sound of fire. Aish. And again, it's an expander. It causes everything to expand, representing the multiplicity like the four directions of the tzitzis. The mem of Shema is the letter, oh, by the way, the sound sh has the highest frequency of any other sound. It's a very high frequency sound. The mem of Shema is the most monotonous sound. The mem of Shema has like no frequency to it. It's just like it's a straight line. And in other words, it contracts. And the mem is the letter for mayim, water, which is the ultimate solvent. You leave anything in water long enough, it becomes the water. Even metal, you can put metal inside water, and after a while it just kind of becomes the water. It takes a long time, but eventually it will become the water. Mem causes everything to become part of it, and that's why a mikveh has mem 40 inside it. The final mem actually looks like a mikveh, and the amount of water you need in it is 40, which is the number mem. And you'll notice that whenever someone's gotten scattered, physically scattered by going after his or her desires too much or whatever, the mikveh causes a kind of a retightening up of one's loose nuts and bolts to like get them back, get their head screwed on back on straight, getting into that mikveh and starting again. So shin represents like expansion, mem represents contraction, which is the same thing, contracting all four corners of the tzitzis in my left hand before I say Shema. And then I say Shema, Shema. The word letter ayin, what does the word ayin mean? I. The letter ayin is the actual word ayin, is the word eye. That's the eyeball. Okay? And in Hebrew, it means to look into something. When you look deeply into something, you're le'ayen, to look, to eye something deeply. The study in depth of Talmud is called iyun, from the word eye again. Okay, to look deeply into something. So it's saying, there's the world of multiplicity. Scatterbrain multiplicity. Then there's the mem, which is like focus it in, realize it's all one. Yeah? And ayin, go deep into this. Meditate on this. You got to meditate. And a good word for this is to meditate. Look into it. Meditate on it. Focus on it. Meditate. Shema. Then Yisrael. We're not going to go into Yisrael right now. Hashem, that which surrounds space and time. Elokeinu, which means Elokim Shelanu, is what's filling space and time. So Hashem, that surrounds space and time. Elokeinu is what's filling space and time. Hashem, that which surrounds space and time. Echad, it's all one. The whole thing's one. That's what's surrounding, that's what's filling is absolute oneness. Not that there's one of them. See, these guys believe there's one of them. Here we're saying it is one. It's absolutely undifferentiated oneness, and that's all that exists. And therefore, don't even look while you're saying it, because all of this is an illusion. That's Shema, based on these names that I've been teaching you. Okay? Now, the next name, we only have 2 left. Okay, so we're almost there. See if we can nail them in the last 5 minutes. The last 2 are Melech is the next word. And then the last one, they go together, more or less. Ha'olam. Melech means king. But it's not the kind of king that we have in mind. See, those of you who are raised in a democracy see kings as evil. But what we really think are evil are dictators, despots. That's what we're really against. If there was a king who was like really great and like had the best things in mind and like really wanted to rule with benevolence and the people coronate him and he looks over his people, loves his people, they love him, everyone's connected. He uses his riches for the betterment of the country. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with a good king. A good king's great. The problem is that corruption hits and kings get egomaniacs and become megalomaniacs and wind up taking out their own people and all kinds of other issues happen. Kings have traditionally been dangerous, including in Israel. We got a whole book of kings that talks about all kinds of kings that were not such good guys. But there were kings like King Solomon, kings like King David, who were super holy, of the holiest people that ever lived. And they were kings. And you wouldn't want anything better than that because a king like that knows a lot better than the people. So when you have a King Solomon, democracy is much worse than a King Solomon. But when you start looking at some of King Solomon's grandkids, when they were ruling, democracy would have been a lot better than those kings. But a king doesn't mean anything evil. A king just means that he's in charge of the people and the people are his subjects. And God is the king of the universe. God is ultimately the king of the planet. And it's a king, though, that we coronate. How do we know we coronate it? Who says we coronate God? Isn't God in total control? And the answer is no, absolutely not, because you have free will. You can make God king and you can make God not king. Isn't that right? You can totally connect and say, God, you're the king of the universe, and you can just totally ignore God. It's an amazing relationship, a real relationship. Even more than any other king, because any king made of flesh and blood, okay, you could choose to love him or not love him. He's still the king. In your life, though, you can totally ignore your God, and you can turn your back, walk the other way your entire life until you die, having ignored the king. Okay, in the end, you do have a hook in your mouth. He's going to reel you in. There's only so far you can run. You will get reeled in at the end. But in your lifetime, you always have free will to connect or disconnect. Connect or disconnect. You always have that choice. So he's really a king. He's not a despot. God is a king. Gives you space. And if you want to swim the other way from the boat, he'll let out line. That's part of fishing. Yeah, any of you guys ever fished before? Catch a big fish, you don't want to fight him so much your line could break. You let him out. I forget what that's called, bail or something. I forget what it's called. But the fish, you let it out. It has a little noise it makes when it's letting out line. Let the fish go have some fun. Let him fight till he gets tired. Once the fish gets tired, you reel him back in. So for us, God is the king of the universe. For sure, he's the king. But we have a relationship with God where we ultimately make the choice. We can make the choice to live in the kingdom, or we can live in the same house, but not let it be the kingdom. We can take the mezuzahs off. We can get rid of all the Judaica. We can get rid of all the books and replace them with encyclopedias and novels. That's up to us. We can crown God king, or we can take off his crown. And if you really look at life, you'll see that everything is a choice of who wears the crown. Let's say, for example, God says keep kosher. So when I'm keeping kosher, I've put a crown on God's head and said, okay, I don't care if this burger's $2 and the kosher burger's $7. You're the king, God, so I'll do the 7. Because if I make you king, I don't care if it's 7. I'll pay any amount. Or I'll forgo the burger, but you're the king. And when I say, you know what, God, forgive me for this one, but, it's $2. What do you want from me? It comes with fries and a Coke. $2. You know, God, you know, sorry about this. You know, here's your $2. Grab the burger. Who's wearing the crown? You are. You are. You're the Burger King. That's why it's called Burger King. Because when you go to Burger King, you basically just taken the crown off God's head and you put it on your own. With anything you ever do wrong, you're really wearing the crown, aren't you? So interesting, isn't it? And that's the beauty of Rosh Hashanah when it says we coronate God on Rosh Hashanah. Because what we're basically doing is we have this like 1 month prep for Rosh Hashanah. The last month before Rosh Hashanah we prep. And what's the prep? We're like trying to pry the crown off. Because like by the end of the year we've done so many things. That's clearly us being king and taking God's crown off his head. And so we spend like a month preparing for Rosh Hashanah by trying to pry the darn thing off our head. So by Rosh Hashanah we can pop it on God's head and say, God, you're the king. You get the idea of king? King's super cool. This is where all your free will comes in, is the king business. Making God king or making you king. And it's really always going to be between you or God who's going to wear the crown. And the last word of the 6 holy words of a blessing is ha'olam. Ha'olam is one of the most interesting words in all of Hebrew. Now, what do you think it means? Let's take a guess. Someone here? World, yeah. King of the world, king of the universe, right? Melech ha'olam, king of the world. Olam. Ha is the, olam is world, or universe. Want to hear something amazing? The word for hidden in Hebrew is olam, which is a really strange thing. Olam, like ne'elam. Like a lady would say if she can't find her car keys, she'll say, "Ne'elmuli et maftechot sheli." My ne'elmuli. Here, olam. Ne'elmuli. It's the passive tense. My keys have gone hidden from me. I've lost my keys. That's how you say it. Meaning, think about it. All there is God. Before creation, right? All there is God. And what did God do? In order to create a creation, he had to hide himself to create space and time. Space and time, it's necessary for God to hide himself to make it. Do you get that? So like God is all there is, but then he created space and time. And that's where he hid. So he's hidden in the world. But the world means hidden. So the world actually is God. It's just God hidden in the world. Whatever. You'll think about that a little bit. But it's pretty deep stuff. That the word for hidden in the world. And by the way, if we use hidden instead of world, what does it say? What does Melech Ha'olam mean now? It means hidden king. Hidden king. And ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth that the king's hiding? Whoa. Okay, and someone who wishes to see God everywhere, you'll see it. But you can meet the guy right next to you, you'll think God's hiding everywhere. He's totally hidden. So I'll end with a story. I've got a lot of great meditations for you guys, but we're not going to do that right now. We're going to do a story. And this is a story of a king who's just desperate to like be around his people. But the problem is every time he's around his people, everyone's like bowing down, yelling, long live the king, and like it's trumpets playing, and he's always in these fancy outfits, and like he never gets a chance to be amongst the people. So what did he decide? He's throwing a big party for all his subjects in the capital. And the king got a makeup artist to make him up looking like the average subject of the kingdom. Put him in a whole bunch of wardrobe that just made him look like the average commoner. He was unrecognizable. And he headed out into the party. Now, the king only shows up halfway through a party, for this big, once everyone's there and the trumpets. So the king spent the first half of the party in the seat. And so he gets some wine. He heads over to the bar. And there's some drunk. Everyone's drunk, but there's one guy who's really drunk. And he is just making joke after joke after joke about the king. And the king's got his wine. He's trying to laugh with everybody. And here's this guy. And this guy's like, what a fool the king is. And how about the time when the king, and the king's just like, whoa. And then he heads over. He's like, okay. He puts his wine down. He starts heading over to the hors d'oeuvres. Gets the hors d'oeuvres, It's all gorgeous silver, and like little silver forks and spoons and stuff. And he just sees people coming over, and they're just like grabbing forks. putting them into their coat. Another guy's like taking all the meatballs and pouring them into a little sack over there, and they're like, they're stealing from him. They're stealing from the king. The king's just like, whoa, what's going on here? What's going on? Anyway, it's time. One of his aides comes up to him. He knows which one he is. He says, listen, you got to go back and put on your royal garments. It's time to greet your subjects. And so the king goes back. King, everyone rise for the king. The king comes in and everyone bows and everyone's flat on their faces. And then the drunkard from the bar, gets up and just says, long live the king. And everyone else says, long live the king. And the king's just like, the hidden God. Think what it's like to be God. Think how endlessly patient and loving God is. God is like so patient, so loving. And we mention it every time we say a blessing. The hidden God is just like crazy about it. Let's make sure we're not that guy at the bar. Let's be the ones who are there in the banquet, totally appreciating the benevolence of the king. When we say Melech HaOlam, or the hidden king, let's be cognizant, no matter where we are, whether we're in public or in private, that the king's hidden in everywhere. And to make sure that we're living our lives based on the intimacy of the hidden king, who is not only eminent, but immanent in all things. So Baruch, here's all 6 words. Baruch, right, which means knees, means lowering my stature, letting my ego go down so that my soul rises. Yeah, and God is the source of all things, and I'm recognizing, blessing means to recognize. I'm recognizing God as source. Ata is his essence, right to the core of who God really is, right? And I can only call God you, which is chutzpah. I can only call God in the second person because I've lowered my ego. Now my soul rises, and my soul and God are contemporaries, so I can call God you. Okay? Hashem's, which is the pictorial, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, how God creates the world. We're made, obviously, of the final Hey. And how God surrounds space and time, was, is, and will be. Elokeinu is Elokim Shalanu, or is immanent inside of everything. God is within all of creation. That's the Elokus, is God's, it's called Shechina also. I didn't mention that, but it's called Shechina, how God's inside creation. Melech, who's the king, and we all have free will to connect or disconnect. Ha'olam, the hidden king, or the world itself around us, is actually just an illusion, that where God has removed himself, so to speak. And the last thing is just the idea that we need to live our lives knowing that the king's there, no matter where we are, and to honor and always give thanks and praise for his benevolence and patience with us, and goodness that he bestows us. And so from now on, when you make a blessing, please, when you make your next blessings, is take your time. Take your time. It's also not chata, and it's not chaolam. Even if you're Russian, it's not chaolam. Okay? It's baruch ata. It's not baruch ata. I hear big rabbis all the time, they'll be at a Sheva Brachas, as if they're really thinking about the word melech. They're like, baruch ata, baruch ata, chata. Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech. Or melech haolam, chaolam. Chaolam. Shakol brara lichvoidoi. Or whatever the end of their blessing is. But you hear that? Like, is there any concentrating going on there? Think about that. Baruch ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. He's singing. He got a solo part. Someone gave him a solo under the chuppah. Okay? When you make your blessings, slow it down, man. Put on the brakes. This is your chance to tap in. Tap in. We tap in the morning with a long service, and for the rest of your day, every bracha you make is tapping into that original well water that you dug and filled in the morning. Shachris, you're filling the well, and every blessing for the rest of the day, you're tapping into that same water. And so you want to just slow it down. Make a nice long baruch, a nice ata, not chata. It's not baruch chata, baruch ata. Okay? And really give it its time. Oh my gosh, it'll change your life. To just start making brachas patiently and slowly and really think through everything you learned over this class. Shalom, everyone.